Welcome to Inside the Philippines. I'm your host, and tonight we're hearing from Clyde, a 61-year-old baker from Portland, Oregon. For nearly 4 decades, Clyde built a life around craft and routine early mornings, fresh bread, steady hands. But when his kids scattered across the country and stopped calling, when the house he'd maintained for 20 years became nothing but empty rooms and memories, he made a decision that would change everything. He sold that house, packed up his life savings, and headed to Vietnam looking for a fresh start. He was searching for community, for purpose, for somewhere he could rebuild what he'd lost. What happened next is a story about trust placed in the wrong hands, about legal systems that protect locals over foreigners, and about how a man's entire life savings can disappear into property he'll never own. Here's his story, in his own words. My name's Clyde. I'm sitting here in a studio apartment in Portland, Oregon, working part-time at a Whole Foods bakery counter, and I need to tell you about the 2 years I spent in Vietnam and the $80,000 I'll never see again. For 38 years, I ran the same neighborhood bakery. Small place, nothing fancy. I'd be up at 3 in the morning, hands in dough before the sun came up, making sourdough and croissants the way they're supposed to be made, with time and attention and actual craftsmanship. I knew my regulars by name. They knew my kids. It was the kind of place where people came in every Saturday morning for the same order, where the coffee was always hot and the bread was always fresh. I built something there, or at least I thought I did. My kids grew up in that bakery. When they were little, they'd come in on weekends, help me knead dough, get flour all over their clothes. My daughter used to stand on a step stool to reach the counter. My son would sneak chocolate chips from the bins when he thought I wasn't looking. Those are good memories. But here's the thing about kids. They grow up, and then they leave. My daughter went to Boston for college. Got a job there, met someone, stayed. My son went to Austin, then Seattle. These days, I get a text on my birthday if I'm lucky. Maybe a happy Thanksgiving message. Christmas, they send cards with photos of lives I'm not part of anymore. They're good kids. I don't blame them. They've got their own things going on. But the calls stopped. The visits stopped. And suddenly that house in Portland, the craftsman I'd been maintaining for 20 years, fixing the porch, keeping the garden up, painting the trim every few summers, it just felt like a museum. Every room was full of furniture for people who didn't live there anymore. My ex-wife and I split about 15 years back. Nothing dramatic, just drifted apart the way couples do when work takes over and you realize one day you're roommates more than partners. She remarried, moved to Bend. We're cordial. But that meant the house was just me, rattling around in 3 bedrooms and a kitchen that used to smell like Sunday pancakes. I kept working. What else was I going to do? Up at 3, make the bread, serve the customers, close up, go home to an empty house. Repeat. It was fine. It was routine. But somewhere in there, I started feeling like I was maintaining something for nobody. Like I was baking bread that didn't really matter to anyone but the people who bought it. And even they probably didn't care if it was me or someone else making it. One of my regular customers, guy named Jim, he retired and moved to Costa Rica, kept telling me about it every time he'd come back to visit family. Clyde, you gotta get out of here. Go somewhere warm. Somewhere you can actually afford to live. Somewhere you can breathe again. At first I'd brush him off. Portland was home. The bakery was mine. But then I'd go home to that empty house and I'd think, what am I holding on to here? About a year ago, I made the decision. I listed the house, got $170,000 for it, which sounds like a lot until you realize you can barely buy a decent condo in Portland for that anymore. I walked through it one last time before the new owners took possession. Looked at the photo albums I'd packed into boxes. Pictures of birthday parties, graduations, family dinners. Nobody wanted them. My kids said to keep whatever I wanted, donate the rest. So I did. I had $170 grand in my bank account and no particular reason to stay in Portland. The bakery had a new owner lined up. My kids were scattered across the country living their lives. My ex had her own life. I was 61 years old and completely untethered. Jim kept pushing Costa Rica, but I started doing my own research. I'd sit up late at night watching YouTube videos about retirement abroad, reading expat forums, looking at cost of living comparisons. Thailand kept coming up, but it felt too party-focused, too centered around the nightlife scene. Not that guy. I just wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere affordable, somewhere I could maybe open a little cafe or bakery and build something again. Not for a family this time, just for me. Vietnam kept appearing in my research. The cost of living was low, really low. Beautiful country, good food culture, people seemed friendly. Most importantly, there was this sense that craft still mattered there. The banh mi stalls, the coffee culture, the attention to detail. I liked that. I'm a baker. I understand craft. I applied for a 3-month tourist visa, bought a one-way ticket to Da Nang, and figured I'd scope it out. If it worked, great. If it didn't, I had enough money to come home and start over somewhere else. The important thing was to leave Portland, leave the empty house, leave the museum I'd been curating for a family that had moved on. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Community, maybe. Purpose. Somewhere I could start fresh and build something that felt like it mattered again. Somewhere warm where people still appreciated things made by hand, made with care. Looking back now, I can see how vulnerable that made me. How desperate I was for belonging without even realizing it. But at the time, sitting in that empty house in Portland, packing up 38 years of my life into boxes, all I felt was relief that I was finally doing something different. I had no idea what was waiting for me in Vietnam. No idea that 2 years later, I'd be back in this studio apartment with half my money gone and nothing to show for it but an expensive education in property law and misplaced trust. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I had to actually get there. I landed in Da Nang on a Tuesday afternoon in March with 2 suitcases, $165,000 in my bank account, and absolutely no plan beyond the first week. The heat hit me the second I stepped off the plane. I'm talking wet, thick heat that made my shirt stick to my back before I even got through customs. Portland in summer is mild, maybe 80 degrees on a hot day. This was something else entirely. The immigration officer stamped my passport without looking up, and just like that, I was in Vietnam. I'd booked an apartment online modest place in An Thuong, which is the beach area north of the city center, $400 a month, which seemed impossibly cheap. The landlord was this older Vietnamese guy who spoke maybe 10 words of English, but he showed me around with a lot of hand gestures and smiling. 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, balcony overlooking the street. The motorbikes started at 6 in the morning and didn't stop until midnight. That first night, I lay in bed listening to the city and thinking, what the hell did I just do? But here's the thing, after a few days, I started to like it. The chaos, the noise, the fact that nobody knew me or cared who I was. In Portland, I was the guy whose kids never visited, the baker who sold his shop, the divorced guy rattling around alone. Here, I was just another Western face in a city full of tourists and expats. The cost of living blew my mind. I could get a full meal at a local spot for about 40,000 dong, that's less than $2. Coffee was 20,000, maybe 50 cents. I'd walk down to the beach in the mornings, watch the locals doing their exercises, then grab banh mi from a street vendor for breakfast. The bread was decent, actually, not sourdough, but fresh, crusty, made with care. I'd study how they built the sandwiches, the balance of ingredients, the technique. I started exploring the neighborhoods, looking at the small bakeries and cafes. Most of them focused on Vietnamese sweets, bánh bò, bon flan, that kind of thing. The French influence was still there in the baguettes, But I kept thinking about what you could do if you really focused on European-style artisan baking. Proper croissants, real sourdough, the kind of stuff I'd spent 38 years perfecting. About 3 weeks in, I saw a flyer at a coffee shop weekend expat mixer at a beachfront bar. I almost didn't go. I'm not great at that kind of thing, walking into a room full of strangers, making small talk. But I figured, what else was I going to do? Sit in my apartment, watching Netflix? So I went. The bar was called Bamboo Beach, right on the sand with those low tables and cushions. When I walked in, I immediately regretted it. The place was full of older Western guys, 60s, 70s, some of them all with Vietnamese girlfriends young enough to be their granddaughters. The whole scene made me uncomfortable. These girls hanging on their arms, the guys buying rounds of drinks, everybody pretending this was normal, that this was love. I was about to leave when I noticed a woman sitting at the bar with a few other people, clearly Vietnamese, but dressed professionally, slacks, nice blouse, not the tight dresses the bar girls were wearing. She was talking with two other women, laughing at something one of them had said. She looked up, caught me staring, smiled politely. I ordered a beer. Buy a Saigon, ice cold. Figured I'd drink it and get out of there. But then she came over. First time at one of these? She asked. Her English was perfect, barely any accent. I nodded. That obvious. You look like you'd rather be anywhere else. She laughed. I'm Lynn. Clyde. We got to talking. Turned out she worked in hotel management at one of the big resorts on the beach. She'd come to the mixer with colleagues, more for networking than anything else. She asked what brought me to Da Nang, and I told her the truth. Sold my house, sold my business, needed a change. She didn't immediately ask how much money I had or suggest I buy her drinks. She just listened. Then she asked about the bakery. Most people's eyes glaze over when you talk about your work, but Lynn seemed genuinely interested. She asked about the process, about what makes good bread, about the difference between commercial yeast and sourdough starter. She told me her father had always dreamed of opening a restaurant before he died heart attack 5 years back. Sudden, no warning. Her mother still talked about it sometimes. What could have been? We exchanged numbers. I figured that was that polite conversation with a local, probably wouldn't hear from her again. But she texted me the next day. Asked if I wanted to grab coffee, maybe visit the market. She knew where to find the best local ingredients, could introduce me to the vendors. Over the next few weeks, we met up regularly. She'd take me through the neighborhoods I wouldn't have found on my own, explain Vietnamese ingredients, help me negotiate when my landlord wanted to raise the rent. She had this way of making me feel like I wasn't just another clueless expat stumbling around. Like I actually belonged here. We'd walk the Dragon Bridge at sunset, watch them lighted up in colors. She'd tell me about growing up in Hoi An, about her younger sister raising her son mostly alone because her husband worked construction in Hanoi and only came home a few times a year, about the pressure her mother put on her to get married, to give her grandchildren, even though Lynn was focused on her career. I found myself looking forward to seeing her. She never asked for money, never suggested I take her shopping or pay for expensive dinners. We'd eat at local places, split the bill. It felt easy, natural. About 2 months in, she invited me to Hoi An to meet her family. Just for the day, she said. They'd love to meet you. My mother makes incredible pho. I should have been nervous. Meeting the family felt significant, like we were more than just friends. But I was 61 years old and lonely as hell, and here was someone who seemed to actually enjoy my company. So I said yes. Looking back now, that was the moment everything changed. That was when I stopped being a tourist, passing through, and started becoming someone with something to lose. But at the time, riding on the back of her motorbike down Highway 1 toward Hoi An, the wind in my face, the rice paddies spreading out on either side, I just felt alive for the first time in years. Like maybe I'd found what I'd been looking for. Like maybe I could build something here that would actually matter. Hoi An is about 30 kilometers south of Da Nang, maybe a 40-minute ride on a motorbike. Lin drove. I sat on the back, holding on to the sides of the seat, watching the countryside roll by. Rice paddies, water buffalo, little villages where kids played in the dirt roads. It was beautiful in a way Portland never was. Simple, honest. We pulled up to a narrow house near the Thu Bon River. Pale yellow paint, red tile roof. Before we even got off the bike, the door opened and her mother came out, wiping her hands on her apron. Small woman, maybe mid-60s, gray hair pulled back. She didn't speak any English, but she smiled at me like I was already family, grabbed my hand, pulled me inside. The house smelled like lemongrass and ginger. Her younger sister Mai was in the kitchen, stirring a huge pot of pho. She looked like Lin, but younger, maybe late 20s, with a tired edge to her face that Lin didn't have. Her 8-year-old son was at the table doing homework, and when he saw me, he jumped up, practiced his English. "Hello, mister. My name is Duck. Nice to meet you." I shook his little hand. Kid had the biggest smile. The mother kept talking in Vietnamese, gesturing at me, and Lin translated. "She says you're very handsome. She wants to know if you're married." I laughed, told her I was divorced, kids grown and gone. The mother nodded seriously, said something else. "She says that's good. You deserve happiness." We sat down to lunch. The pho was incredible rich broth, fresh herbs, thin slices of beef. The mother kept ladling more into my bowl every time one got close to finishing. Mai's son showed me his English textbook, pointed at pictures of animals, tested me. "What is this?" "A tiger." "And this?" "An elephant." He was so proud when I got them right. Lin translated stories about her father. He'd worked in construction but always dreamed of opening a restaurant. He'd make these elaborate meals on Sundays, invite the whole neighborhood. When he died, the family sold his tools to pay for the funeral. Her mother still kept his favorite chef's knife in the kitchen, couldn't bring herself to use it. I told them about my bakery, about Portland, about my kids. Mai asked if I missed them. I said yes. But honestly, sitting in that kitchen with these people I'd just met, I felt more connected than I had to my own kids in years. They were actually interested, actually present. After lunch, Lin took me through the ancient town. Hoi An is this UNESCO site. All these old buildings from the trading port days. Japanese bridges, Chinese assembly halls, lanterns hanging everywhere. During the day, it's full of tourists, but Lin knew the back streets, the quiet spots. We sat by the river, watched the boats go by. That's when she told me her dream. She wanted to honor her father's memory by opening a place that combined Vietnamese and Western baking. Like banh mi, but elevated, she said. French techniques with Vietnamese flavors. My father would have loved that. I told her it was a great idea. Started talking about croissants with pandan, sourdough with Vietnamese coffee. We went back and forth, building on each other's ideas, getting excited. It felt like the conversations I used to have with myself in my head. Except now there was someone else who understood, who cared. "You should do it," I said. She smiled sadly. "Maybe someday. Right now I need to help my mother. Mai's husband sends money from Hanoi, but it's not enough. The restaurant is just a dream." We rode back to Da Nang as the sun was setting. I held on a little tighter this time. Over the next few months, things deepened between us. She'd stay over at my apartment a few nights a week. She'd cook Vietnamese food, teach me the recipes. I'd make bread, show her techniques. We'd sit on my balcony in the evenings, drink cheap Vietnamese beer, watch the motorbikes go by. She never asked for money, never hinted at it. When we went out, we'd split the bill or I'd pay, but she'd insist on paying next time. It wasn't transactional. It felt real. I met her work colleagues. They'd tease her about dating a foreigner, but in a friendly way. I'd see her at the hotel sometimes when I'd walk by, professional, competent, clearly good at her job. This wasn't some bar girl looking for a ticket out. This was a woman with her own life who chose to spend time with me. About 6 months into my stay, my 3-month tourist visa long since extended, Lynn mentioned her lease was ending. We were lying in bed in my apartment, the fan spinning overhead, the heat making everything feel slow and lazy. "What if we found a place together?" she said. "Something with space for a small bakery cafe. You could finally do what you came here to do." I'd been thinking about it anyway. My visa situation was getting complicated. I kept extending, but I couldn't do it forever. I needed to either commit to Vietnam or go home, and the idea of going back to Portland, to that empty studio I'd rented, to working at someone else's bakery again, it felt like giving up. "You really think we could make it work?" I asked. "A bakery cafe? Why not? You have the skills. I know the local market. We could start small, build it up." We started researching. I'd spend hours online looking at equipment costs, flour suppliers, potential locations. Lynn would contribute ideas, talk about what Vietnamese customers would want, how to price things. She seemed as invested in the vision as I was. That's when I started learning about Vietnamese property law. Foreigners can't own land in Vietnam. They can own condos, but only under specific conditions, and even those have restrictions. If you want to own a business property, you either need to form a Vietnamese company with local partners, which is complicated and expensive, or you put it in a Vietnamese person's name and trust them. I brought this up to Lynn one night. "How do we even do this legally?" She thought about it. "Put it in my name. We're building a future together, right? When we marry, it'll be ours anyway." It made sense. We'd been together 6 months. It was serious. And what was I going to do? Spend thousands on lawyers to set up some complicated corporate structure that might not even work? "My uncle works in real estate," she said. "He knows a developer who's selling pre-construction units in a new building. Ground floor spaces perfect for commercial use, apartments above. He could probably get us a good deal." The uncle's name was Min, mid-50s, drove a nice car, spoke decent English. He showed us renderings of the development modern building, prime location near the beach, ground floor units with big windows perfect for a cafe. 3.6 billion dong for a turnkey space. I did the math, about $65,000. That included the commercial kitchen setup, basic furnishings, everything ready to go. It was a lot of money. But it was also my dream. Our dream. And I had $165,000 sitting in my Portland bank account doing nothing. "Can I see the contract?" I asked Min. He handed me a thick stack of papers, all in Vietnamese. "I can have it translated," Lynn offered. I asked about putting my name on the document somewhere. Min explained that foreign ownership structures were complicated, required forming a company, navigating Vietnamese bureaucracy, paying lawyers, much easier to put in Lynn's name. "You trust her, yes?" "Family is simpler than paperwork." I looked at Lynn. She squeezed my hand. "We're in this together." I wired the deposit that week, $20,000. Watched my balance drop to $145,000. The construction timeline was 6 months. We'd have the space by early next year. That's when the requests started. They were small at first. My husband had lost his construction job in Hanoi. Could we help with their rent for a few months until he found something new? 28 million dong per month. I did the math. About $500. Seemed reasonable. Family helping family. Then Duck needed new school uniforms and books. 11 million dong, $200. What was I going to say no to a kid's education? Len's mother had dental problems. 85 million dong for treatment at a private clinic. $1,500. The public system had a 3-month wait, and she was in pain. How could I refuse? Each request came with tears, with gratitude, with promises to pay me back when things improved. and I rationalized every single one. This was family. This was community. This was investing in the people who would support my business, who would tell their friends, who would make this work. I told myself I was being needed again, that it felt good to help, that this was what belonging looked like. I should have seen the pattern forming, should have noticed how the requests always came with urgency, always with emotion, always when I'd already said yes to the last one. But I didn't. Because I was 61 years old and someone needed me again. And that felt better than anything had felt in years. The construction was supposed to take 6 months. By month 7, it still wasn't finished. I'd drive by the site with Lynn on her motorbike, watch the workers moving slowly, scaffolding still up, windows not installed. Min kept saying there were delays with permits, issues with the building inspector, problems with materials, shipments from Hanoi. Then came the call. Min needed to meet with us urgently. We sat in his office, small place above a cell phone shop, stacks of property documents everywhere, photos of buildings on the walls. He poured us tea, apologized profusely, explained the situation. The permits were stuck. The building inspector wanted facilitation fees to move things along. Without them, construction could be delayed for months, maybe longer. "How much?" I asked. 850 million dong. I did the math in my head. $15,000. That's a lot of money. Min nodded. "This is Vietnam. This is how things work. We can wait, follow official process, maybe 6 more months. Or we can facilitate, finish in 2 months. I looked at Lynn. She looked worried. "We've already invested so much," she said quietly. "If we stop now, we lose everything." She was right. I'd put in 20,000 for the deposit, another 10,000 over the past months helping her family. If I walked away now, it was all gone. This was just protecting my investment, getting the project back on track. I transferred the 15,000, watched my balance drop to 120,000. The construction started moving again. I told myself it was worth it. A month later, Lynn's mother collapsed. I was at my apartment when Lynn called, crying. Her mother had been shopping at the market, felt dizzy, fell. The ambulance took her to the public hospital. The doctor said it was her heart, she needed tests, maybe surgery. "The public hospital has a 6-week wait for the tests," Lynn said through tears. "They're just making her comfortable. But the private hospital can do everything this week. They can save her." "How much?" 450 million dong. About $8,000. I met them at the private hospital. Modern place, air-conditioned, English-speaking staff. Lynn's mother was in a bed, hooked up to monitors, looking small and scared. Mai was there, holding her hand. Duke sat in a chair, trying not to cry. The doctor explained the situation in clear English. Heart condition, needed immediate intervention, surgery scheduled for the next morning. I signed the paperwork. Put it on my credit card because my Vietnamese bank account was low. The surgery went fine. Her mother recovered. Everyone was grateful. Lynn cried, thanked me, said I'd saved her mother's life. How do you put a price on that? My balance was down to 110,000 plus 8,000 on my credit card. The requests kept coming. Duck needed tutoring to prepare for entrance exams to a better school, 5.5 million dong monthly. About $100. Seemed small compared to the thousands I'd already spent. Mai needed money for the motorbike repair. The roof needed fixing. They needed new furniture because the old stuff was falling apart. Each time I'd calculate, rationalize, send the money. Each time I'd tell myself this was temporary. Once the bakery opened, once we had income, this would all balance out. The building was finally finished. Min took us through the space. It was exactly like the renderings, modern, clean, big windows facing the street, commercial kitchen in the back, apartment upstairs with one bedroom and a bathroom. It was beautiful. It was everything I'd imagined. But it needed furnishings, equipment. The basic package Min mentioned didn't include tables and chairs, didn't include the proper ovens and mixers I'd need for artisan baking. I'd already shipped my professional equipment from Portland. My Hobart mixer, my proofing oven, my tools. Cost me $6,000 to ship and clear customs. But I still needed local furniture, plates and cups, a proper espresso machine, display cases. Another 340 million dong, about $6,000. I was down to 96,000 in my account. In 1 year, I'd spent $69,000. The building, the facilitation fees, the family emergencies, the equipment, the furniture, each expense reasonable on its own. Together, they'd consumed nearly half my life savings. But I had a bakery now, a real space. My equipment installed. It looked professional, ready to open. That's when I started noticing things. I'd ask Lynn to see the property documents, the papers that showed her name as owner. She'd say they were being processed, that Vietnamese bureaucracy was slow, that she'd have them soon. Can't we operate without them? I'd ask. Of course, but we need them for the business license, for official registration. Min is handling it. I'd ask Min. He'd say the same thing, processing, bureaucracy, soon. A man started calling Lynn's phone late at night. I'd be lying next to her in bed and her phone would light up a Vietnamese name and she'd silence it immediately. Who's that? My ex-boyfriend. He won't accept that it's over. Why don't you block him? I have. He keeps calling from different numbers. It happened 3-4 times a week, always late. Always silenced immediately. I started checking the construction permits myself online, used Google Translate on the Vietnamese government website. Couldn't find any record of facilitation fees. Couldn't find any record of delays. I asked other expats at a coffee shop if facilitation fees were normal. Some said yes, some said no. One guy, Australian, told me straight, "Mate, if you're paying fees without seeing paperwork, you're getting taken." But I'd already paid, already committed, already invested my Portland mixer, my proofing oven, my tools from 38 years of baking. They were installed in that space. They were fixtures now. I told myself the Australian was cynical, that he didn't understand Vietnamese culture, that Lynn was different. I told myself a lot of things. The truth was already there. I just wasn't ready to see it yet. I woke up one morning about 18 months into this whole thing and did something I should have done from the beginning. I sat down with a notebook and added up every dollar I'd sent. The deposit on the property, $20,000. Facilitation fees, $15,000. Mother's hospital surgery, $8,000. Family support over 18 months, $500 a month times 18, $9,000. Shipping my equipment from Portland, $6,000. Local furniture and build-out, $6,000. Ducks tutoring, $100 a month for 12 months, $1,200. Mother's dental work, $1,500. May's motorbike repairs, roof repairs, furniture, school supplies, clothing. Another few thousand in bits and pieces. $76,000. Gone. I had $89,000 left in my account, plus $8,000 in credit card debt. I stared at those numbers for a long time. The bakery space was finished. My Portland equipment was installed, the Hobart mixer that had cost me $4,000 back in the day, the proofing oven I'd saved up for, the tools I'd accumulated over 38 years. All of it sitting in a commercial kitchen in Da Nang, ready to make bread. But I couldn't open. Not legally. Not without the proper licenses and permits. And those required property documents that Lynn kept promising were almost ready. My tourist visa was maxing out. I'd been extending it every few months for nearly 2 years. But immigration was getting stricter. The officer at my last extension told me I needed to either leave Vietnam for a while and reset, or get proper residency, business visa or marriage visa. Both required legal documentation I didn't have. I confronted Lynn about it one evening. We were at the bakery space, my space. I kept thinking, even though legally it wasn't mine at all. She was arranging tables, talking about what kind of flowers we should put out, what the opening menu should be. "We need the property papers," I said, "for my visa, for the business license. We can't keep waiting." Her face changed. The smile dropped. "Min is working on it. It's been 18 months. Vietnamese bureaucracy is slow. You know this. I need to see something. Anything. Some proof that this property is in your name, that we have legal standing to operate here." She got defensive, started crying, said I didn't trust her, that I was treating her like a stranger after everything we'd been through together, after everything I'd done for her family. That's the trick, right? Turn it around, make you feel guilty for asking reasonable questions. But it worked. I backed down, apologized, told her I was just stressed about the visa situation. A week later, Lynn's phone rang at 2 in the morning. Same Vietnamese name I'd seen before. She silenced it immediately, but I was already awake. "That's him again?" "I told you, my ex. He's obsessed." "Let me see your phone." Her expression hardened. "What? If he's harassing you, let's block him properly. Let me see." She pulled the phone away. "You're being paranoid. I'm handling it. We fought. First real fight we'd had. She accused me of not trusting her, of being a typical foreigner who thinks all Vietnamese women are scammers. I accused her of hiding something. Neither of us said what we were really thinking. She left. Went back to her mother's house in Hoi An, didn't talk to me for 3 days. I spent those 3 days at the bakery space, testing my equipment, making bread nobody would eat, trying to pretend everything was fine. The Hobart mixer still worked perfectly. The proofing oven maintained temperature like always. I made sourdough loaves, croissants, baguettes, arranged them on the counter, took photos, posted them on Facebook with a caption about opening soon. My kids commented, "First time in months. Looks amazing, Dad. So proud of you." They didn't know I couldn't actually open. Didn't know I was $76,000 into a business I legally had no claim to. Lynn came back on day 4. Apologized. Said she'd been stressed, that her mother was struggling with the medical bills. Wait, I thought I'd paid those? And that she'd taken it out on me unfairly. "Min has the documents," she said. "He'll bring them by tomorrow, I promise." Min didn't come tomorrow, or the day after. When I finally reached him by phone, he said there was one more fee. The final transfer of ownership from the developer to Lynn's name required a processing charge, 285 million dong, about $5,000. "Then we'll have everything?" I asked. "The documents, the title, everything legal?" Yes, everything complete. This is final step." I was so tired of paying. So tired of one more thing. But what choice did I have? Walk away from 76,000 already spent? Leave my equipment behind? Admit I'd been an idiot? I paid the 5,000. My balance dropped to 84,000. 2 weeks later, still no documents. I went to Min's office unannounced. The cell phone shop owner said Min hadn't been there in days, didn't know when he'd be back. I called Lynn. "Where's your uncle?" "He's busy. He'll contact you soon." "I need to see him now. I need those documents now." "You're being aggressive. This isn't how we handle things in Vietnam. You need to be patient." Patient. I'd been patient for 18 months while $81,000 vanished into promises and emergencies and facilitation fees. I went to the bakery space. Stood there looking at my equipment, my tables, my chalkboard menu. It looked exactly like I'd imagined back in Portland. Exactly like the dream. Except it wasn't mine. Not legally. Not in any way that mattered. The phone kept ringing at night. 2-3 times a week. Lynn kept silencing it, kept saying it was her ex. But one night she fell asleep before silencing it, and I saw the screen. Not saved under a name. Just a number. And below it, a string of messages in Vietnamese. I used Google Translate on her phone while she slept. My Vietnamese wasn't good enough to read it directly. The messages were from someone asking when she'd be done with work, when she'd come home, calling her M, the intimate term for a younger girlfriend. Recent messages. From yesterday. I scrolled back. Months of messages. Pictures of them together. Him picking her up from work, her at his apartment. She wasn't staying with me most nights because she was busy. She was staying with him. I woke her up, showed her the phone. She didn't even try to deny it at first, just looked tired. Who is this? My boyfriend. Your boyfriend? My actual boyfriend. I've been with him for 3 years. The room tilted. Then what the hell am I? She sat up, pulled her knees to her chest. You're someone who wanted to help, someone who had money to invest, someone who could give my family a better life. I thought we were building something together. We were. Just not the same thing. I left the apartment, drove to the bakery space on a rented motorbike at 4 in the morning, stood there in the dark, looking at everything I'd built, everything I'd paid, for everything that had never been mine. The sun came up. Workers started appearing on the street, opening shops, sweeping sidewalks. Life continued like normal. Like my entire world hadn't just collapsed. I called Min again. No answer. Texted him. No response. I went back to his office. Still not there. The cell phone shop owner finally said, I think he moved. New office somewhere. I checked my bank balance on my phone. $84,000 left from my original $165. $81,000 gone. And I owned nothing. Had legal claim to nothing. Had been nothing but an ATM wearing a nice guy mask. The truth was there now. Unavoidable. Undeniable. I'd built my dream on someone else's foundation, and they'd pulled it out from under me one piece at a time while smiling and calling it family. I needed to know the extent of it, needed to see exactly how bad it was. I found Min's office 3 days later. Not the one above the cell phone shop, a new place across town near the airport. His car was parked outside. I waited until I saw him arrive, then followed him in. He looked surprised to see me, not guilty, not apologetic, just mildly inconvenienced. Clyde, I was going to call you. Where are the property documents? He poured himself tea. Didn't offer me any. There's been a complication. What kind of complication? The property is registered in my name for tax purposes. It's normal in Vietnam. Once we complete the final paperwork, your name, not Lynn's. He nodded. Temporary arrangement. Very common. I paid $81,000 for property in your name. You invested in a business opportunity. These things take time. I felt something break inside me, something that had been holding on, hoping there was still a reasonable explanation. I want to see the documents. All of them. The purchase agreement. The title. Everything. Min's expression didn't change. I don't have them here. Then where are they? In process. With the lawyer. What lawyer? Give me a name. A phone number. He stood up. I think you should leave. You're being very disrespectful. I've paid you $81,000. I think I've earned the right to be disrespectful. You paid for construction, for permits, for facilitation. Those costs were real. If you don't trust the process, that's your problem. That's when I understood. There was no complication. There was no process. There never had been. I want my equipment back. The Hobart mixer, the proofing oven, all of it. Min shook his head. Those items are fixtures. Part of the property, they stay with the property. I bought them. I shipped them from Portland. You installed them in my building. They're mine now. Vietnamese law is very clear on this. I left before I did something I'd regret. I went straight to the bakery space. My key still worked. The equipment was all there, exactly where I'd installed it. My Hobart mixer, my proofing oven, 38 years of tools. I called a Vietnamese lawyer I found online, explained the situation. He listened patiently, asked a few questions, then delivered the news I already knew was coming. Without a contract, you have no legal claim. Verbal agreements mean nothing. The property is in his name. The equipment is installed as fixtures. You have receipts for money sent, but no documentation of what it was for. In Vietnamese law, you have nothing. What about the family? The medical bills? The support payments? Gifts. That's what they'll say. Voluntary gifts to people you cared about. No legal obligation to repay. There has to be something. You could file a civil suit. It would take 2, maybe 3 years, cost you $10,000 minimum in legal fees, and you'd probably lose. The courts favor Vietnamese citizens in disputes like this. I hung up. I sat in that bakery space for hours, ran my hand over the Hobart mixer, opened the proofing oven, looked at the tables I'd furnished, the chalkboard menu I'd hung, the espresso machine I'd bought. Everything I'd imagined, everything I'd paid for, none of it mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Lynn. "I'm sorry it happened this way. You're a good man. You deserve to be happy." I didn't respond. I went back to my apartment, started looking at flights to Portland. Cheapest one was $3,000, leaving in 2 days. I had $81,000 left. No, 84 after I'd paid Min that last 5,000, minus 3,000 for the flight. 81,000. I'd arrived in Vietnam with $165,000 and a dream of building something that mattered. I was leaving with 81,000 and an expensive education in property law. I called my daughter. First time I'd actually called her in months. She picked up on the 4th ring. "Dad, is everything okay? I'm coming home." "From Vietnam? When?" 2 days. Can you pick me up from the airport?" "Of course. What happened? Is something wrong?" I couldn't explain it over the phone. Couldn't find the words. "I'll tell you when I see you." "Okay, Dad, are you sure you're okay?" "I will be." I wasn't sure that was true, but I said it anyway. I packed my 2 suitcases, left everything else, the furniture, the dishes, the life I'd tried to build, gave my landlord notice. He didn't ask questions. The night before my flight, I went back to the bakery space one last time. Used my key before Min could think to change the locks, stood there in the dark, looking at everything. I thought about stealing my equipment back, loading it onto a truck, taking it to a shipping company, sending it home. But I'd looked into it. The shipping costs, the customs, the paperwork, it would cost more than the equipment was worth at this point. And legally, it wasn't even mine anymore. So I just stood there. Said goodbye to the Hobart mixer I'd saved up for 20 years ago. The proofing oven that had been with me through 3 bakery locations, the tools I'd accumulated over 38 years of baking. Then I left. Locked the door behind me. Dropped the key in a trash can on the street. At the airport, I sat in the terminal for 3 hours before my flight, watching Vietnamese families say goodbye, Western tourists checking in for adventures, everyone moving through their lives while mine had just collapsed. The flight attendant asked if I wanted anything to drink. I ordered a beer, Bia Saigon, ice cold. It tasted bitter now. Somewhere over the Pacific, I did the final calculation. Started with $165,000, spent $20,000 on the property deposit, $15,000 on facilitation fees, $8,000 on the mother's surgery, $9,000 on family support, $6,000 shipping equipment, $6,000 on furniture, $5,000 on the final transfer fee, another $10,000 in bits and pieces tutoring, dental work, roof repairs, motorbike fixes, all the small emergencies that added up. $87,000 gone. I had $78,000 left after the flight and moving costs, less than half of what I'd started with, and nothing to show for it but an empty feeling where hope used to be. When we landed in Portland, my daughter was waiting at arrivals. She hugged me, asked how I was, didn't push when I said I was tired. On the drive to her place, she said, "You can stay with us as long as you need, until you figure things out." I nodded. Looked out the window at Portland. Gray sky, rain. Everything familiar and foreign at the same time. I'd left here looking for somewhere I could belong. Somewhere I could build something that mattered. Instead, I'd spent $87,000 learning that belonging can't be bought. That family, real family, isn't created through money. That I'd confused being needed with being valued. And that in Vietnam, like anywhere, foreign money flows one direction, into the local economy, into local pockets, with nothing coming back except promises and empty spaces where dreams used to be. I stayed with my daughter and her family for 2 weeks, slept on their couch, helped with the dishes, tried to be useful without being in the way. My son-in-law was polite but clearly uncomfortable having me there. I couldn't blame him. My daughter finally sat me down one evening after her kids were in bed. "Dad, what happened?" So I told her, all of it. The bakery dream, the property in someone else's name, the family emergencies, the equipment I'd shipped and lost, the woman with a boyfriend the whole time. The $87,000 gone. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she just said, "I'm so sorry." Not, "I told you so." Not, "How could you be so stupid?" Just sorry. That almost made it worse. I found a studio apartment a week later. 600 square feet, $1,400 a month, in a neighborhood I didn't know. It was all I could afford. I moved in with my 2 suitcases and nothing else. No furniture, no equipment, no tools from 38 years of baking. All of that was sitting in a bakery in Da Nang that belonged to someone else. I needed work. Applied at every bakery in Portland, most didn't respond. The ones that did took one look at my age and found reasons to pass. Finally got hired part-time at Whole Foods, 25 hours a week at $16 an hour, making sandwich bread and cookies from pre-mixed corporate recipes. I'm the oldest person there by 20 years. The kids are nice. They ask where I worked before, and I tell them I had my own place for almost 4 decades. They're impressed, ask why I'm working here now. I just say I needed a change. I don't tell them about Vietnam. Don't tell them I spent my retirement building someone else's dream. I'm 62 now. My savings sit at $75,000 after rent and moving costs. That's my retirement. That's everything. No pension, no property, no bakery to sell when I'm too old to work. Just 75 grand and whatever Social Security will give me when I'm old enough to claim it. I do the math sometimes late at night. If I'm careful, if nothing goes wrong, if I keep working part-time until 170, I might be okay. Might. But that's a lot of ifs. My kids call more now. Not a lot, but more. They're worried, I think. Worried their dad got scammed. Worried he's going to need money. Worried they'll have to take care of him someday. I tell them I'm fine. I'm not sure they believe me. Here's what I learned, and I need you to hear this if you're thinking about doing something similar. In Vietnam, like most of Southeast Asia, foreigners can't own land. They just can't. You can own a condo under very specific conditions, but not land, not houses, not commercial property. That's not a secret. That's not hidden. It's the law. So when someone tells you to put property in their name, when they say, "We're building a future together," or "When we marry, it'll be ours," what they're really saying is, "You're going to pay for something I will own, and you're going to trust that I'll be fair about it later." Maybe some people are fair. Maybe some of these arrangements work out. But you're betting everything on trust, on love, on a relationship that might be real or might be performance. And if it goes wrong, you have zero legal recourse. Zero, the Vietnamese family wasn't necessarily evil. They saw a wealthy foreigner, and by their standards I was wealthy, willing to spend money. They extracted what they could. That's survival. That's economics. I'm not even sure I can blame them. My mistake was thinking emotional connection created legal obligation, thinking that because I felt needed, I was protected, thinking that being part of someone's life meant they wouldn't take advantage. I spent $87,000 on belonging, on family, on purpose, and in the end, I got none of those things, just an expensive education in property law and human nature. If you're sitting there right now thinking about retirement abroad, about finding love in Southeast Asia, about building something in a country where you don't speak the language and don't understand the laws, I'm begging you, get a lawyer, get contracts, get everything in writing. Don't rely on trust or love or promises. And if someone tells you it's too complicated, too expensive, that family is simpler than paperwork, that's when you walk away. Because family shouldn't require you to give up all legal protection, love shouldn't require you to be financially defenseless. I spent 38 years measuring ingredients, being precise, following recipes, making sure everything was exactly right. All that careful measuring, all that craft, all that attention to detail, none of it protected me from building on a foundation that was never mine. I'm okay. I'm working. I've got a place to live. I'll survive this. But I'm 62 years old, working part-time at a grocery store, living in a studio apartment, with half my retirement savings gone and nothing to show for 2 years of my life except this story. So learn from it. Please. Let my $87,000 buy you something I never got. Wisdom before the mistake instead of after. That's all I've got. That's the whole story. Clyde's story is a painful reminder of how vulnerability and hope can cloud judgment when we're searching for connection and purpose. His experience in Vietnam, though the setting differs from our usual Philippines stories, illustrates universal patterns we see across Southeast Asia. When Western men invest in property they can never legally own, the critical lesson isn't that Vietnamese people are untrustworthy, or that these relationships are always scams. It's that foreign property ownership laws exist for specific reasons, and no amount of emotional connection changes legal reality. When foreigners can't own land, putting property in a local person's name isn't simpler than paperwork. It's surrendering all legal protection. Clyde's mistake wasn't falling in love or wanting to help. It was confusing emotional investment with legal standing, mistaking being needed for being protected. He measured out $87,000 in small, justifiable increments, each one seeming reasonable in isolation, never stepping back to see the full picture until it was too late. If you're considering property investment in Vietnam, the Philippines, Thailand, or anywhere similar, remember, contracts matter more than trust. Legal documentation matters more than promises, and "we're building a future together" should never mean "you pay for everything while I own everything." This has been Inside the Philippines. Share this story with anyone who needs to hear it. And remember, the best investment is the one you never make without proper legal protection. Thank you for watching.